Yeah. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and Lisa. We seem to have a fairly full house tonight. So without more ado, we'll crack on. We're taking this marginally out of order for reasons which will become extremely apparent very quickly. The first item is to receive apologies for absence, and I have apologies from councillors Fuller, Shura and Wade. Do we accept those apologies?
Absolutely.
I'd like to take declarations of interest before representations from interested parties, because one of our number is about to step out of the meeting and join you. So, declarations of interests. Any disclosable pecuniary interests?
I have one. I'm a adjacent neighbour to the Annual Rugby Football Club on Occupation Road.
Yes. Duly noted, and I know that you will now wish to go and move to a different location for a moment in order that you can then address us as a resident rather than as a councillor. Are there any other disclosable pecuniary interests? Any other interests? I should mention that in connection with the second application, which is the nursery up at Arundel Lodge, Mr. and Mrs. Gent are personal friends of mine, and furthermore, one of my grandchildren actually attends the nursery, but it isn't a disclosable pecuniary interest. So, that said, we're going to take representations from interested parties. I see that I have been given a list. The first one is Mr. Ian Clark.
Thank you very much. It's odd to stand there. Shall I stand over there? I'll try not to strip over any wires. So, thank you for letting us speak tonight. Thank you for attending everyone as well. I'm sorry you haven't seen this, but I got back to
on the screen here.
Oh, that's fantastic. I only got back from holiday late last night, so I finished drafting this morning. I'm going to start at the back, if I may, very quickly. It strikes me, at least, that there are 5 levels of concerning planning issues about the application on Occupation Road for the Rugby Club. The first one is the impact on the character of the area. I've simply put some information about the club itself. Could you scroll down to the very bottom? It's simply the point that seems worth noticing that they're aiming to have a flat pitch, and as doing so, this side over here is going to have a 1 metre retaining structure on it, which is then going to raise the level of this pitch, presumably high above the existing level. So those people walking down will have a significantly changed walk, but also a structure that's going to go here, the sort of supporters area, is going to have a roof height roughly the size of this scaffold tower. It can be significantly higher from Smart Meadow on the riverside. One thing you will notice is my paint pole here, which you're going to become friendly with in the next few photos, with a little green bag on top. That's set at 4 metres, which is roughly the height of the spectator's point. We can move up to point D. Sorry, other way up, since I'm working from the bottom, unfortunately. So noise levels. I'm going to come back to the 4 metre high wall, pretty heavily towards the end. But they've put forward a noise policy, and I know certainly, I'm not sure if other neighbours hear lots of noise from the rugby club at the moment, but there's a lot of noise goes on, and the noise policy seems fairly vague in what it intends to do. And I think one of the things that hopefully would happen is we get a better noise policy from it. I won't go into all the details, but this idea of a noise monitoring supervisor who would rectify the situation if there was a problem, and then that's it, seems vague at best. We can go up to point C. Traffic is a big issue, and I know there's some promise of more parking somewhere on site. But there doesn't seem to be a great deal of allowance for the extra traffic that's coming out of Copstock Meadows at the moment. Particularly if, as one would suspect, there's going to be an awful lot of use of the facility. There's going to be a lot of money spent on this, and therefore they're going to be probably using it and hiring it out to other clubs and schools, etc., on a regular basis. So that seems to be a concern. There's also issues about footpath access, about how wide the pitch might go over the present path, and any changes to the flow of that. We got one more, please. The environment seems a really important issue. The floodplain issue is probably a problem. They admit that the pitch is going to go in an area that's regularly flooded, and there's a mitigation put in a sort of a scrape going along the north side of the pitch up towards St Peter's Road, which hopefully would cope with some of the offlow from this higher pitch. But the concern there seems to be that it's going to bring flood waters closer to houses. And also the rugby club itself has said in the past that the water coming off the Cotswold Meadow site seems to be making the pitch boggier. So that isn't allowed for at all. Loss of grassland is important. I know that they say it hasn't a great biodiversity value, but at some point, presumably the pitch is going to run out of its life. What's going to happen to the area then? And also really important is something that it's an important area that the council owns, obviously. We've put a lot of time and effort into its biodiversity, and it's got county wildlife site status. We know from the local wardens that work there that there's an awful lot of important wildlife, in particular moths, which are undersold in their importance. But with the floodlights, the way that they're set, they appear to have tried to stop them putting too much light into residents' homes, but then pushing it far into the Snipe Meadow, which will clearly have an impact on moths, etc. We can scroll on again. Actually, if we scroll up to the first page, and then the sort of big two most important visual aspects, which I've put in here. First of all, it's all linked to this idea of operational hours. They've suggested that the club will run the pitch from 9 in the morning till 9:30, 6 days a week, and then a slightly shorter time on Sundays. Linked to that, the floodlights will run till about 10 o'clock. So the impact on residents locally is going to be significant, particularly as they're trying to be using an awful lot. And the two ways of mitigating that, we move down here, the 4-metre acoustic wall. I had a quick bit of research when I was away on holiday. The Berlin Wall was 3.78 metres, so it's taller than the Berlin Wall. There's my painting post again. There's the green thing at the top. You can see the impact on the way it's shown in the plans. It's relatively nestled into the surroundings, but actually you can see it's significantly taller than neighbouring places. It's a 2.5 metre hedge. If we scroll down a little bit from the other angle, you'll see a standard sort of 2 metre fence here, and there's that significant height difference. So it's going to be a big imposing position. The other problem, of course, is lots of the houses on St Peter's Road are raised up because the road's higher. So if we scroll up another, I've taken this from about ground level in 25A and 27. You can see there's the fence, and there's the top of the 4-metre wall, and with a highly impressive bit of CGI coming up now. I've tried to emulate what that would look like. And clearly that running all the way down in front of all the residents' houses is an issue. I know people have said in the past the rugby club was there before lots of people moved in, but the lease on the club post-dates most of the houses being built, so there's got to be a bit of give and take at some point in there. The other point, we move on down here, is the floodlights. They're going to be significantly higher than existing floodlights in the area. I've done a quick estimation today. I think the present rugby posts are about 12 metres, so they're going to be 6 foot, my sort of height, higher than that. There are in theory going to be 8 of them, but in practice on one of the plans there's a 9th floodlight put in on the north side of the playing field. And the impact of these running until 10 o'clock, potentially 6 nights a week, is going to be significant on residents as well as the big barrier. I suppose one last point down here is the fact that we all like being good neighbours, and it seems like the rugby club have done this without perhaps talking to residents about and landowners about whether this is a good idea or whether it's the best solution to what they're proposing. And maybe there's an issue as well about what started as a community club is now becoming a much more professional club, and they have good ambition and want to be more professional in their facilities, but the impact on the residents nearby and the neighbourhood is going to perhaps be quite significant. If we just scroll to the very last page, it strikes me that the best thing that we can do tonight, obviously we don't have any strong authority to stop this happening as such, but I just put in here a simple idea that we don't support, or Hamburg Town Council doesn't support the planning application and uses its power as a landowner to engage with the rugby club to find a better solution for residents and the club's own ambitions. But also perhaps if NNC decide that they do think it's worth going ahead with this plan, we ask for some conditions to be imposed, in particular issues about lighting, the curfew, the noise assessment, making sure that actually works, and crucially perhaps a less intensive amount of time being active, maybe 3 nights a week to an earlier time, that sort of thing. That's it. I've spoken too long. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. I've got Nigel Bett also down.
Do you want me to come out there?
You may find it easier. I mean, if you're happier to stay there, by all means do. But
I really have enormous thanks to Ian for the paper that he's produced, which he did whilst he was on holiday, so he gets extra bonus for that. I think he summed up the situation perfectly, to be perfectly frank. The proposal we have from the rugby club is arrogant. It ignores everybody. It ignores the residents, it ignores the traffic, and it ignores the surroundings and the meadows, the wildlife, the whole thing. Chairman, it's just an arrogant approach, and that has to be wrong. And to not discuss the matter with your landlords before you go ahead doing anything is just unreal, really. I don't think what they're producing and what they're suggesting is in any way in keeping with the town of Arundel or its traditions or anything that the town and this council and we stand for and why we live here. It's outrageous. I don't have words for this god-awful fence they're suggesting. Ian has done the detail. I merely give my views, Chairman, that I think it's appalling. And I do hope that your committee and subsequently the town committee, the full committee, turn down this application, or not turn it down, but very strongly recommend that it is not granted. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I've also got the name of Colin Pendrell on my list, but with a question mark because it could be somebody else.
What's this? Sorry, me?
No, I gave you my time. We agreed. You're speaking.
I don't fall out about it, but we're happy to hear from anybody.
Can I decide which one of them is Colin Pendrell?
I'm Chris Hayes, my wife's Sarah. Obviously, we've got straight on to the rugby pitch. Hitherto, it's been really nice being there. The sound of people having fun and exercising, playing rugby is not a problem. Saturdays, crowd noise isn't a problem. So when this dropped on us out of the blue, it was quite a shock. I thought that area of land was going to be protected from development because of its nature of adjoining snipe meadows. So we're very distressed about the wall. I think it's completely excessive because it actually only protects us from noise because we're forming the noise screen for the rest of the town. So why would you impose that to protect us from something like that? It's really depressing. And I know we're not entitled to a view, but that picture shown earlier, the good fence level, ours, I put one on similar to that, but ours was even lower. But I think it's going to be even worse than we thought. Other thoughts that I had in the meantime would be that they have got floodlit sports pitches elsewhere. Have they explored the option of making some flood bonding or protection around that so that could be used? Because that area wouldn't affect anybody. So those are my thoughts really, and the frequency that's proposed of 6 nights a week we never see night time in winter at all. It's horrible. So that's my impromptu speech. I was expecting later.
Thank you for that. Right. That leaves us to consider the matter as a planning committee. Let me make it clear, we do not have a power of veto as a town council. We are a consultee. We can ask NNC to reject the application. We can object to it, but NNC could listen to our objection and still give permission. We are in a slightly unusual situation because not only are we considering this application as a planning committee of the council, but the council actually owns the land and rents it to the rugby club. Issues surrounding the lease are not going to be relevant to the planning considerations tonight. All I will say at this stage is that for various reasons, which are perhaps almost too complicated to go into, the rugby club is holding over on a lease that was granted more than 40 years ago. It spoke to the town council in the form of Councillor Clark and myself and one other some months ago. At our suggestion, we engaged, we asked them about their sort of plans, and they talked in very broad terms about some plans. And certainly I left that meeting anticipating that as and when they wanted to bring something forward, they would do that in consultation with us. This planning application came out of the blue. We weren't aware it was being made. We hadn't seen any of the documentation on which it was based. Therefore, like everybody else, we've had precisely the same amount of time to study the 40-odd documents that are on the portal. So I say all of that by way of a sort of preamble. I have produced for my colleagues on the committee a paper with regard to the application.
Sorry, I should head out this, we should not.
You probably should actually, yes. Because Councillor Clark has disclosed a disclosable pecuniary interest because his property is affected by this, he is actually now leaving, so he can't in any way be seen to be influencing our decision. So, as I say, I produced some papers which I hope my colleagues have read. Mr. Clark, and I'll call him Mr. Clark for the purposes of this, has helpfully highlighted a number of aspects around this application. One thing is very, very clear, that what is substantially an open green space will start to look like a professional sports ground. We have the lighting that is associated with that. We have 3 stands which would take 210 people plus 3 disabled people on the basis of this application. And we have the acoustic barrier, which sounds nice and cuddly until you actually think about how tall 4 meters actually is. So undoubtedly, it impacts the visuals. It is difficult to see how facing a 4-meter acoustic wall could not impact upon all of the residents who have properties that would back onto it. It is also difficult to see how they would not be considerably affected by 8, or is it 9, quite tall floodlights. Now, it is fair for the rugby club to have pointed out in the design and access statement which accompanies this application that there is floodlighting elsewhere on the occupation road sites which the council rents out to other sports clubs, particularly the tennis club. But this is additional lighting where, in essence, it hasn't been seen in this form before. So we have a lighting issue. We may or may not, I suppose, end up with a noise issue, depending on how effective this acoustic barrier was, and I don't think any of us around this table are capable of saying whether what they claim for it is right. What we can say about it is that if it takes a 4-metre acoustic barrier to deal with it, that brings a whole raft of other issues, it seems to me, into play. I was somewhat surprised that the issue of possible flooding on that pitch was, I would almost say, glossed over in terms of what I have read within the documentation that supports it, primarily the design and access statement. There have certainly been flooding issues historically there. I am led to believe that they have worsened since the Cottesdock Meadows development started to be constructed, something which I think the Town Council thought was entirely predictable and was one of the reasons why they weren't very happy about that development either. And it's also fair to say that, for example, sometimes areas of the tennis club are unplayable because it becomes flooded. It's not regular, but it does potentially happen. We also have the fact that, understandably, given the level of investment that would be required for this, they're looking to operate it as a 7-day-a-week facility from 9 in the morning until quite late at night. And that is a more intensive use than residents have had to experience up to now, and that's another factor that I would invite my colleagues to take into account in considering this. I should perhaps have said, when I mentioned that the rugby club came to speak to the Town Council, that one of the things they stressed was, well, we will need a new lease because clearly we're holding over on an expired lease, and we will need a new lease because there are funding issues around what they were planning to do, and they would need to demonstrate that they have a suitable and long lease available, which makes it all the more surprising that they've approached it backwards and put in a planning application without discussing any aspect of it with us first. Enough from me for now. I'll take my 2 colleagues. We're somewhat short in numbers tonight. I suppose at least it will enable a concise debate. Councillor Chesser, your thoughts?
My immediate thought is the fact that my understanding has been, for as long as this idea has been floated, that it's the success of the rugby club that's brought this on. And I think in some ways they're taking advantage of an opportunity because they won the particular trials associated with promotion. They are playing in a higher league. But in order to play in that league, they have to have certain characteristics at the rugby club, which they don't have at the moment. So I can see that it's a bit of a dilemma. So I don't know how much they actually need such a generous rebuild, if you like, or what is necessary, if you like, and what would be nice. in order to make them as posh and smart as they're obviously going to be. So I can see where this is coming from. What I don't know is how much is necessary and how much is desirable.
Working on the basis that what we've got is what's in front of us, what is your reaction to the sort of elements that, say, have been highlighted?
Oh, I think they're very, they have a lot of I don't know how to say it now, the word's gone. The words go into a black hole, unfortunately, at my age. But value, I think, is the word I would probably use.
Mr. Clark has suggested that these would be all points on which might lead us to have concerns about the application in its present form. Do you share those concerns?
Yes, I do. Yes,
Councillor Quartermain.
Yeah, it is very interesting, I think, because with another hat on within the council, I also look after the marketing area and how to bring more people into our board. And an enhanced rugby club and the way the success of doing is certainly part of that. It's a small part, but it's part of that. So one part of me is torn because I can actually see the value in doing all of this and why they're doing it. The other side, putting my planning hat on, I have to agree and preempting Councillor Chappell's question to me in a minute, that says I do actually agree with a lot of the points that have been brought up. And I think it is, it's difficult for us to be able to agree on something where they haven't had consultation with the landlord, which is Handle Town Council. And I think that process should have been, it's a bit cart before the horse, if that's my expression. I think those conversations needed to have happened before a planning application got put to the planning committee of the council. So from a procedural point of view, I have an objection, a personal objection to that. From looking at all the points that have been raised by the people sitting here and by Mr. Clark, I'm actually in agreement that a lot of further discussion needs to take place about the needs and requirements for it. I understand that the rugby club probably need that, to Councillor Chess's point that if they're moving up in the leagues, they need to have some sort of further facility. But I think further discussion and negotiation needs to happen. I don't think there will be any objection to further facility as long as it is in the within the agreement of the community, the residents, and of the landlord, which is the council. And I think the way they're doing it at the moment is, I don't like it. That's just my basic opinion.
Thank you. In a sense, I'm not surprised by what both of my colleagues have said. Bearing in mind that what the council is required to do is to indicate to NNC Planning, which is the planning authority, one of three things. We can say that we support an application, we can say that we object to an application, and we could say that we have no comment upon an application. I can't conceive of any way in which this council would not wish to comment. Consequently, that leaves us with either supporting the application or objecting to it. If we simply said to NNC we object and fail to set out our reasoning, our objection would carry very little weight. If, however, we take up certain points with regard to the application, and I don't mean some of the procedural matters, for example, raised by Councillor Quartermain, which may irritate the hell out of us, but unfortunately isn't actually going to impress NNC Planning Authority. But the sort of things that clearly we can point to are the change in character that this development brings, the huge visual impact of at least three aspects of this. I'm going to call the Berlin Wall because I so liked Councillor Clark's description of it. the floodlighting, and of course the stands. Those are things that are going to absolutely impact the visuals. They bring with them issues of noise. They bring issues of light pollution. They clearly impact residents in St Peter's Road. I suspect that they may well impact some of the residents on the new Cottesstock Meadows development, which incidentally, as far as I could see, was entirely ignored by the Rugby Club in their design and access statement, which talked about what lay on 3 of the 4 boundaries to the property and completely ignored the fact that there were 4. And of course, the 4th one now is that development. It was also somewhat irritating to read in it that they had a lease agreement with North Northamptonshire Council, which they never had. Clearly, the people who produced the design and access statement worked to the brief they were given, which again speaks volumes for what's happened here. So I think we can raise these issues. It did appear to me, and I took this as well from, I think it's at least one of the comments that I saw on the portal, and I must confess I haven't looked at it since Sunday, so if anybody put anything on there yesterday or today, I haven't had an opportunity to go back and check them. There were 13 on there the last time I looked, but there seem to be more now. But mention was made of the passageway that actually Councillor Clark showed us a photograph of that lies between numbers 25 and 27A St Peter's Road, which is an access way to and from the Rugby Club. And it does rather appear as if that access way might be effectively entirely blocked off by this development, which I think is another factor we should consider. It's not only, of course, the impact on what I'm going to call the human residents, as Councillor Clark told us. Also affected by this is the Snipe Meadow area, which is also a responsibility of the council and of which we are very proud. And the impact upon wildlife of the kind of noise and light levels that are likely to be associated with this, I suspect, will be considerable. So my view is, I speak for the moment as a personal view, that we should object to the application on at least all of the bases that I just outlined, which I think are picked up by my colleagues, but I'll check with them in a minute. What will also happen is that this will be referred initially to full council on the basis that it meets in the middle of the month. However, next month is August and full council does not meet in August. So there might be a bit of a gap in terms of the council engaging with the rugby club. But I'd like to assure members of the public that the council, in my view, will certainly be doing so. I am but one of 14, but I shall certainly be saying as chair of planning that the council should be engaging with the rugby club over this application, and we should have engaged with us long before it was submitted. And whilst I entirely understand the points that Councillor Chesham makes, and indeed, we should all be proud of what the rugby club has achieved, it's punched well above its weight, and it is a fantastic facility that serves people in the town and indeed somewhat further afield. But whether what it proposes is right for this site seems to me to be an entirely different question. Now, the rugby club doesn't have an alternative site currently. personal view is that the rugby club might be well advised to look for a more suitable site to develop a facility of this nature, which would have a less severe impact than with this development where it is. How feasible that is entirely another matter and goes somewhat beyond where we can go tonight. So from the chair, I'm going to suggest that we object on the various grounds I've said. Can I look first of all to my left, Councillor Chesser? Do you object? Do you support? Do you wish to no comment?
I will object.
I object with the comments that you're making.
Thank you. The council will therefore lodge with NNC Planning a formal objection. I have a suspicion, Lisa.
She's been trying to get you for ages.
I just had one question. I don't know a lot about rugby, but I presume they're like shares. They can go up as well as down.
As far as I am aware, relegation and promotion are a feature of the leagues in which Oundle has been playing. I think that it gets a bit different at the very top end of rugby because I think there is some question about whether or not there should be promotion and relegation from their Premier League. Oundle is still some way short of the Rugby Premier League. And so the contributor to the floor is quite right. Of course, if performances on the field decline, they may be having a wonderful facility that is well beyond the playing requirements, if I can push it that way, of the level at which they might be playing. I accept, of course, the training will go on and all the rest of it, but it's a valid point. Lisa, I imagine you're going to want me to actually draft that. It's always the penalty you have for sitting in this place is that whenever you get something that turns out to be somewhat complex, I end up having to draft the actual response that will be submitted to NNC, which I will do. That concludes what we're talking about with that planning application. There are other matters on the agenda, but I rather suspect that almost everybody who has attended tonight has attended because of that application. On that basis, if they wish to leave reasonably quietly and orderly, I'll temporarily suspend the meeting to enable you to do so. And somebody could perhaps mention to Councillor Clark that you come back in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My suspicion is that there is already money in the offing.
Yeah.
And they've got a deadline and suddenly, sorry?
When they were talking about the money aspect, they made it very clear that the money aspects were dependent on the lease. And we didn't offer the new lease because we were going through the whole process of reversing the error which occurred, under which the thing had been registered to NNC instead of to us.
Yeah, Lisa gave you the background. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I didn't go into
It's
that
why
tonight because it is.
Yeah, it's why I think there's a lot of its opportunity. You know, if we're going to do it, we'll go the whole hog.
As a landlord, surely we've got the right to say no. We don't like
As I
it.
say, in terms of the lease situation,
Yeah.
that's an entirely different situation
Yeah.
to the plan one.
But North Southampton's got to listen to what we say because we're landowners, surely we can't.
Not from a planning perspective. You can apply for planning permission on something you don't own.
Well, that's what I said to.
Yeah.
I
So-
don't get that.
Yes, well, that's the way it is. I could plan
There is
to build on your
Or
garden.
I could get to the secretary.
So you can put in a planning application, and all we can do is respond to it in that way. However, there is a lease.
Yeah.
It's not a good lease. It was drafted in 1979 or 6 or something. I've got a copy of it with me.
Yeah.
It is not drafted the way I would have drafted it
But that was
if I was
them.
drafting it.
Yeah.
Maybe less is
No.
crazy because the meeting is still alive. We're still alive.
Um, But, I think we'll have these discussions in another forum on another day. I've got another request, as it were, that's come. Rather than moving on to the two further planning applications that we have to consider, we have on our agenda at item PC 2523 to consider next steps in relation to the felled trees and hedgerows at the bottom of the Cotterstock Meadows development. We've already had occasion to mention once or more tonight. And councillors may recall that we've discussed this before. Mr. Penny has been here to talk to us before, and he's back. And so I'm going to take that item now, so that if he wants to leave us after he's done his bit, he can go, and then we can finish the meeting in the sort of accustomed state we have, i.e. there will be nobody present to see us perform, other than anybody who might be watching us online. So, Mr. Penny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here really particularly because I've got anything new to say, but I was just invited because, it seemed time to see if there'd been any developments from the planning authorities or anything like that. Doesn't appear that, so you may be able to tell me more about that. Just to say, to some extent, personally, the hurt isn't so bad because the leaves are now on the trees that are left behind, and they don't look so bad, as I assume that they would when the bigger trees have gone. I still think it would be good from every point of view if the developer would replace some trees down there, given that they're going to be doing some work of that type down there, I would imagine. But if we haven't gone any further with getting other people involved, I don't think there will go.
Lisa, has there been any development since we last discussed it?
Get other people involved. The first efforts were completely ignored, so then, Tuesday, I think it was the end of last week, I invited everybody, every name that I could think of in terms of planning, and asked them if they could make this meeting for an update. The only response I got was from the reliable planning enforcer, and I just said to him, part of some of the plans we've been looking at, the actual wording on one of the plans states existing vegetation will be strengthened with new tree planting to improve the site's habitats and biodiversity value. And I said to him, how do we get together with whoever to make sure this happens, because it currently hasn't. And he basically came back with this really strange answer saying that the three planning people that have reported them for contravening the planning applications, all three of them have been fully investigated and nothing has happened, nothing has been done wrong. So then I went back to him and I said, does that cover the vegetation and the tree planting? And he said, no. So I don't know why he came back with that really. I was like, that's not really relevant. Anyway, I basically said to him, so if we wish as a council to push that item and find out how we enforce that this happens, or try and get some action on this, do we just come back to you? And he just came back with yes, that's fine. So they wouldn't come to the meeting, none of them would come to the meeting. So basically I think we've just got to put in a very strong objection and say we require that this point is actually enforced in some way, because I don't think they'll do it otherwise, same as a lot of things.
I look towards you, Ian, just because you might conceivably know something over and above what we just heard. I don't know whether you do.
No, nothing. It's all very silent. There's been a lot of change of the staff of the site in the last 6 months. They've had 3 site managers, and every one that new comes on doesn't know anything about what the last one
Previous
did.
ones have said, yeah.
So
And they
what
just
happened
don't.
in December, it was November, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Chopped out. What happened then was 2 site managers ago.
Mm.
So the present site manager is very nice and helpful, but she won't know.
Well, it seems to me that one of our functions, amongst many, is actually to monitor that things are done in accordance with planning permissions, and that planning permissions are sought when they are required. This appears to be an instance where perhaps that has not yet happened. And I would be entirely in favour of writing formally from Oundle Town Council's Planning Committee to say the issue has been raised with us, we've tried to resolve it, no progress has been made. We asked them to investigate to see whether any breaches have occurred, and if they have, to deal with them. And if, as it were, it's too early to tell whether there's been a breach, because, as it were, they've got more time to resolve it, ask them to make sure that nothing is effectively signed off until this issue has been satisfactorily addressed. It seems to me that's the least we can do. You all happy with that approach?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for, as it were, keeping this at the forefront of our minds. Lisa, I'm sure that you'll let Nick know anything that we might hear.
Yeah. We've at least got one person in planning enforcement now that does actually respond to you, which is good. But I think the new head of planning has left though now within 6 months of being
Yes, well, it's a little later in the agenda. I'll have some more words to say about the planning department. Thanks. I rather suspect that the next two planning applications are not going to take us awfully long. The nursery based up at Oundle Lodge off Stoke Newell Road wants to expand. It's put in an application to convert an existing agricultural building to create 2 additional classrooms and an indoor sports area. I won't say it's a victim of its own success, that's the wrong terminology, but it appears to have been extremely successful since it launched, to such an extent that it can't even admit people to its waiting list anymore because it is so oversubscribed. Consequently, they're looking to create this additional space and no doubt feel confident that they'll be able to fill that and operate even more successfully commercially. The actual way in which the thing will be developed and at least push up on the board a little one of the floor plans. I can't believe for 1 second that we would have any concerns about the actual, if you like, mechanics of converting a barn into this facility. They're going to utilise what's there. They're going to replace what is described as, I think, Yorkshire boarding with some timber cladding. They're going to check the concrete sheet roofs and repair and replace as may be necessary. And obviously they've got to create entrances, but they're all going to be on one, as it were, aspect of it. Given that as a council we supported the original application when they wanted to develop it, it would strike me as slightly odd, subject to one caveat I'll make in a minute, if we turned around now and had a problem with the fact that they wish to expand. It's fair to say, however, that when the initial application was made, Highways had initially some issues, and our response had been to support the application subject to, as it were, resolving issues with Highways. Highways, again, have queried this. I think in a way not surprisingly, because in the design and access statement which accompanies this application, the applicants talk about there being some increase in traffic movements that would result, mitigated, they say, by the fact that there would be staggered times for dropping off and then collecting. But they provide no other detail. They don't say how many extra movements there might potentially be. They don't go into any detail about the staggering, etc. And Highways have come back and basically said, well, we want to understand this rather better. It's also clear from the application that the business, which like these things inevitably is labour intensive. They have 15 full-time employees and 7 part-time employees already, which I must admit did surprise me when I read it. This development would require an extra 5 full-time employees. Given its location, it's not the easiest place to get to. There's no public transport routes, as Highways point out. Stoke Rural Road is not the greatest, indeed, Highways describe it as substandard. Usually if it's substandard, you might hope that they'd do something about it. That's another story. But the staff have to get there somehow, and there is no plan within this application to expand the number of parking spaces on site. Although, from personal knowledge, I can say that they're not exactly lacking space up there, and if they needed to create additional parking space, they'd be very able to do so. My personal temptation would be to take exactly the same approach as before, to say that we support the application, subject only to Highways expressed concerns and wishes for further information to be dealt with by the applicant. I may be short-circuiting it by putting that suggestion straight away, but it does strike me that we're probably not going to want to spend a lot of time in this, unless I've misread it completely.
The irony is that Highways are okay with 50 houses being built in the Stoke Rural Road, but not an extra bit of nursery, which it seems ironic, but
Yeah.
no,
That's the pointer. So, no objection and support.
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 No objection.
No objection, I would support it as well. Right, okay, that one is somewhat easier for you to write, I suspect. And the next one should take us even less time, I suspect. Tree works in the conservation area at Haylock Cottages. There are only 2 documents there, the application form itself, which tells you what they want to do, but not why they want to do it. And a location plan, which effectively shows you where the trees in question are actually located, which might just be worth bringing up. It does seem to fulfill the tree husbandry approach that we usually adopt. There you go, there are the 3 houses, so you can see Haylock Cottages and they're kind of behind them if you want to look at it in that way, or ahead of them depending on how you review it. As I say, there's nothing in there about why they want to do it at all. I confess, I know what a crabapple is, I know what a thorn is, I'm not entirely sure what a gladitia is. I didn't mean to look it up, but I just ran out of time. I would point out that the only options, realistically, are to go no comment or no objection, or to come forward with a persuasive argument as to why any one or more of those trees should actually be listed. I don't feel able to say whether any one or more of those trees should be listed. I'd be a bit surprised. I think it's one where we can effectively trust the tree officer. If there is something remarkable about, say, the gladitia, simply because I don't know what it is, and he was worried about what is proposed, I'm pretty sure that we will end up with a revised plan of some description. But it's not like they're planning even to remove them. It appears to be in the nature of tree husbandry. All happy with that?
Yep.
So no objection.
It's probably you that got them listed years ago. They might have pigeons dropping,
Well, they're not,
dropping
yes,
poo
they're
on
not-
people's cars.
they're not TPO'd, so they're just in the conservation area. In which case, the planning outcomes are all set out on the agenda. You will notice that we had various concerns with regard to 28B West Street, but that was actually granted. Planning appeals, there aren't any. We've already dealt with the fell trees and hedgerows at the bottom of the Cottesstock Meadows development, which means that we've already reached any other relevant matters for report. Sadly, I'm going to raise.
You've just got to do the minutes.
Oh, we missed the minutes entirely. You're quite right. Yeah, we shot around the agenda and then missed it completely. Right, yes, we ought to approve and sign the minutes the planning committee held on the 24th of June before we go any further. Present at that meeting, yes, was Councillor Fuller, who's not here tonight, Councillor Chesser, who is, and Councillor Quartermain, who is, because it's one of those very rare meetings when I wasn't actually able to be here. Two of you were here, you've seen the minutes. One of you likely to say yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seconded. All those in favour? Fine, for signing. I did read them. One of the things that wasn't discussed at that meeting, and therefore should have been discussed tonight, but hasn't been discussed tonight either due to an oversight, is that we still haven't sorted out our terms of reference. Unfortunately, it only struck me that it wasn't on the agenda after the agenda, of course, had already been published. And it isn't really possible to kind of fudge it and kind of deal with it anyway. So we're going to have to deal with it in August. And the only good thing is that by the time full council meets again in September, it should be sorted.
I don't think it'll be, because we amended it quite substantially
we
last
did.
year, didn't we? So I don't think-
In response to the Mayor's recent strategy effort, I have responded to him and made a number of suggestions, often looking at changes to committee structures or committee terms of reference and some of the practical things to deal with, not just, if you like, the actual big vision stuff. And at least one of those involved a change to our terms of reference, which I will deal with before the next meeting and make everybody aware of what I'm going to suggest. Now, we've got ourselves slightly back on track, having gone completely off piece. Councillor Chesser, anything else?
No.
Councillor Quartermain? Councillor Clark? Various things. It is now over 3 months since I had a meeting in this room with the Barron MP and raised my concerns that we were getting precisely nowhere with the planning department in connection with our wish to, as it were, explore the possibility of developing a neighbourhood plan, which we had wanted to do, as it were, alongside the work that NNC would be doing on their local plan replacement. I had no feedback from him myself. I'm not aware that Lisa's had any, and certainly we've not heard anything from NNC planning either. Could you therefore contact Lee Barron, ask him whether he did in fact raise it with anybody, and if so, whom, and was anything said to him pointing out that they hadn't been in touch with us at all? I am aware that there is now a named person at NNC to do with neighbourhood plans, which is a development, or at least about 2 weeks ago there was. I say that because, as we're all aware, that the staff turnover there is remarkable. But I have seen an email with this chap's reference on it. So, as it were, independently of Lisa's contact with the MP and wherever that might take us, I'm going to try and look out this guy and contact him directly and just see whether we get anywhere at all. Not least because it's quite apparent. Simon Fairhall was at full council last week and mentioned the local plan and the idea that it should go out to consultation early in the year. That's interesting, isn't it? Because if they're moving towards a consultation in 6 months, how much consultation has there been with Oundle Town Council about plans for Oundle? The answer is precisely none. This just does not seem to me to be the way to run local government. But anyway, so there is that issue. A secondary thing that I'd like to raise is that Charles Church notice about the Underwalk development is still sat outside the old riverside. There has still been no planning application for it, as far as I'm aware. Admittedly, it is in Ashton Parish, but as far as I'm aware, there's been nothing. We've certainly not been notified of anything. I thought we'd raised it with the enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Can we go back to them and ask them what's being done about it? I knew I should have written it down. There was a third thing, I can't remember for the life of me what it was.
I am told that the first house is now built or was being built on the Stoke Doyle
On the Stoke
Road.
Doyle side.
Is that it?
No, it wasn't. No, it's gone completely.
I've got two things, one of them might be yours.
It might well be right.
So
Have we
the
got it?
other update, you know, we wrote to the conservation officer asking for an updated, help with an updated conservation area.
Yes, we did. That.
Whatever, nothing, absolutely nothing.
Right, go back to him. Can you, in doing that, copy in Simon Fairhall, Helen Harrison, and our other NNC councillor, pointing out that we haven't received a response and that we really are very keen to work with planning, but they seem to entirely ignore our existence. And maybe one of our councillors, particularly Councillor Fairhall, who seems to have got quite enthusiastic about his new role, maybe he'll do something. And Helen Harrison is usually good for giving people a bit of a kick, so maybe we'll prompt something. That wasn't it, but I'm glad you reminded
Well,
me.
then the other one was, which will just be enforcement again, is the riverboat. There's still been nothing, and he's developing it. He's got all manner of stuff there now, so I don't know what's happening with that.
Well, can we raise it yet again? It does seem to me that in the last sort of 12, 18 months, I reckon we've seen more issues where we wanted to raise enforcement matters than I can remember. And the problem is that 9 times out of 10 we raise them and very frequently nothing happens. There was a considerable exception to that with the restaurant and the old post office, where as soon as we raised issues about that, they leapt in and sort of dealt with it almost immediately.
And that's that new officer that is very good at getting back to me, so hopefully he'll.
Yeah, so let's hope that we
Send a
can.
big thank you letter.
Well, if there was another thing, I'm afraid to say it's entirely escaped me. So rather than sitting here in the hope it'll come back to me, I'm going to suggest we close the meeting at 9:25.